All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fourth installment here of our HSJGA rules webinars. My name is Ryan. I'm the tournament director with the Hawaii State Junior Golf Association. And also with me today as a panelist, we have, many of you know her, Mary B. Porter King, who is our HSJGA president. And she is also a rules official that's worked many championships across the board in amateur golf and also on the professional scene as well. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. We do have one more webinar coming up next week, so just keep your eyes out for that. And we do have some other things. We're trying to update you guys weekly, so just make sure you're checking your emails if you want to get involved with what we have going on. Most of it's obviously virtual, but we'd love to hear some feedback from you guys as well on some things if you ever have any questions or anything like that. So with that said, let's get rocking with today. So some good rules talking about today, some fun stuff, just a little overview for you guys. Going over some rules on specifically with bunkers and putting greens. Also going to talk about marking, lifting, and replacing a ball. Going to talk a little bit about dropping in a relief area and also playing, what happens when you play a wrong ball. So rules 12 through 14 are what we're going to cover today. So first one we're going to talk about bunkers. Obviously, you guys know bunkers are like specifically prepared areas on the course. They're their own area of the course, and they're really there to test the player's ability to play from sand. So they're meant to be a different challenge than necessarily other parts of the course. And just a little definition of when your ball is in the bunker. The rules define that as if it touches the sand on the ground inside the edge of the bunker, or if it's inside the edge of the bunker and rests on the ground, or if it's on a loose impediment, a leaf, a movable obstruction like a rake, or an abnormal course condition like temporary water or an integral object. So if you look at this little diagram here, a few things you can see: balls that are in the bunker, balls that are not in the bunker. So it has to be inside the edge and touching the sand there. So. Just a little thing about what you can do inside the bunker here for you guys.
Under the 2019 rules, there is no penalty for moving loose impediments when your ball is in a bunker. However, some bunker restrictions continue to exist. For example, you are still not allowed to touch the sand with your club, behind or in front of your ball, when making a practice swing, or when making your backswing.
Cool. Yeah, so some pretty obvious things there. Can remove loose impediments. That's a new addition to the rules in 2019. And then also no touching in front or behind the ball. So just a few things that are allowed and not allowed in the bunkers. I think most of you know this, but it's really important, obviously, to pay attention because this is a different area of the course. Different rules apply in the bunker. So you're allowed to, like they said, remove loose impediments like leaves or rocks, remove movable obstructions like a rake. You can dig your feet in as long as it's, a reasonable dig. You're not, ruining the bunker or anything like that. You're allowed to place your equipment in the bunker, which a lot of people don't know that. You're allowed to take your bag into the bunker with you if you need to. It's a really big bunker, and it would be help you save pace of play, things like that. You're permitted to obviously smooth the bunker if you're caring for the course. And then you can always ground your club if it's something you need for balance, or if you're leaning or resting on your club. As long as you're not, if you look to the right side here, as long as you're not testing the condition of the sand to see if it's if it's wet or if it's really hardly packed sand or softly packed sand, not allowed to touch it or touch it with a club in front or behind the ball. So that would be seen as kind of testing the surface and kind of judging how the bunker will play. And any penalty or any breach of these conditions, these restrictions, you would receive the general penalty, which would be 2 strokes there. So just important to know that when you're in the bunker, you do have specific restrictions that you can and can't do. Most things are allowed, but there are some things like touching the sand that are not allowed.
So Ryan, this is the rule that got Patrick Reed this last year.
Yeah,
Yeah, right? You
yeah.
remember what he did?
He, I believe he was kind of like brushing the sand back when he was taking a practice swing. Kind of, he was essentially was changing the condition of how his ball lies. I think there was some question whether he was in a bunker or not, but it would still apply in that he was, essentially grounding his club behind the ball and affecting his lie of the ball. So by moving sand away, he was brushing the sand back. It
He
seemed like
improved,
his ball
yeah,
in
he
a
improved the area of its intended swings. It was quite
Mhm.
controversial.
Yeah, so he essentially thought that he didn't do it when I believe, obviously, the camera caught him and it was shown that he did move quite a bit of sand. So in that instance, because he improved his lie of the ball, he's eligible for a penalty. If that is done maybe accidentally, um, maybe it's a different story. But he clearly did it intentionally twice in a row, so he
Yeah.
did get a general penalty for that one. And then also, just like the bunker, there are specific restrictions and rules on the putting greens. And just another definition here, when your ball is considered on the putting green, obviously when it touches the putting green that you're playing, or it lies on or in anything that is inside the edge of the putting green. So maybe that's like a leaf or a towel or something like that. So a few things that you're allowed to do on the putting green. You are allowed to repair damage. So a quick little video here.
The 2019 rules allow you to repair almost any damage on the putting green. In addition to ball marks and old hole plugs, you are allowed to repair spike marks and any other damage caused by shoes, repair animal damage, and repair damage caused by maintenance practices. The fixing and repairing of the putting green must be done promptly and must not improve your line of play beyond the repair of the damage.
So clearly,
Learn more.
Allowed to repair damage there. You want the intended play of the putting green. You want as best as you can get. So that's why you're permitted to essentially repair most type of damage. They've added in 2019. They added the ability to fix the spike marks as well, which is a pretty self-explanatory rule. There makes a lot of sense. So on the putting green, if your ball accidentally moves, there's no penalty, and you just replace it. And then after lifting and replacing, if your ball moves, in that case, it's always replaced. So in this one, if it's accidental, if it's before you have marked or lifted your ball, if it's just by natural forces, you would just play it as it lies. If it's something else that moves it accidentally, then you would move it back. A little bit on marking and replacing the ball. This is another nice rule, one that makes sense, obviously. Very helpful for you guys. This happens every now and then.
After you mark, lift, and then replace your ball on the putting green. If it moves for any reason, including through your own accidental actions, or for some other reason such as wind, always replace your ball back on its original spot. If you don't know the exact spot, estimate it as accurately as you can and replace the ball there. To learn more.
So essentially the ball, once you mark it, it owns that spot on the putting green. If it moves anywhere other than that spot, then you're able to replace it. So owns the spot once you have the mark there. And then there's no deliberate testing of the green, just like in the bunker. So no rubbing the surface of the green or rolling a ball on the green to test, maybe the speed or something like that. And then when it comes to being on a wrong green, the definition of a wrong green would be any green other than the green that you're playing. And interference occurs from a wrong green when obviously your ball touches the wrong green, so if it's within the perimeter of the green there. And then also if the wrong green interferes with your intended stance or area of intended swing. So a few times when you go wayward here, you might find yourself on the wrong green. So the correct ways to proceed there would be obviously relief, like we said, must be taken. And it is free relief. You're not penalized for hitting it on a wrong green. You just have to make sure you take relief from it. And your relief is considered 1 club length. Since it's free relief, you're not paying, you only get 1. So 1 club length for the from the nearest point of complete relief. So that's where A, your ball no longer touches the green, and B, neither your stance or your line of play are affected by that green. So little explanation here to the right. The diagram explains your reference point, which is the nearest point of complete relief. You see that here. And then your relief area is that little half circle, 1 club length each way. And then you have your little half circle there. And then obviously the relief area cannot be closer to the hole, and it must be in the same area of the course as the reference point. So if the reference point is on the fairway or on a fairway, the entire relief area must be the fairway as well. So. And again, you must take complete relief. So you have to make sure you're no longer standing on the green and it's no longer affecting your intended stance or area of intended swing. Happens every now and then. The last thing you want to do is take a big divot off the wrong green. So. And then also things that happen on the green with the flag stick. Obviously, as you guys know, in 2019, they added the rule where the flag stick may be left in the hole. And that decision, it's to be made before you make any stroke. So you can't decide like mid-stroke that you want to change your mind. More of a preference thing here when it comes to the flag stick, I think.
Under the 2019 rules, there is no penalty for hitting the flag stick that is in the hole when you played your stroke from off the putting green, or if you played your stroke from on the green. So if you want to leave the flag stick in the hole, perhaps to save time or because you think it helps you, there is no penalty if your ball hits it. If your ball is not holed, play it as it lies.
So 2 ways that you might leave the flag stick in the hole, like you said, to save time is probably the main one. You know, the bigger your group, maybe the more time it might save if you leave it in for everybody. But if you're taking it in and out, it might be slower actually. So, and then obviously you guys know the flag stick may be removed as well. And just like leaving it in the hole, having it removed, you must decide before making the stroke, and you can either decide to have it completely removed from the hole, or you can authorize someone to attend that flag stick. And that would be considered, you know, obviously holding the stick still in the hole, but pulling it out before it necessarily hits the hole. So. And then if the flag stick is removed and the ball hits the flag stick or the person attending the flag stick, depends on if it's accidental or if it's deliberate. If it's accidental, you would just play the ball as it lies. And then if it's deliberate, which typically I think it would be deliberate. I don't know why you would aim for that person, but if it's deliberate, the stroke would be canceled and typically the penalty is applied. So you'd have to replay that stroke in that case. And then one last tidbit about the flag stick. You see here, if your ball is resting up against the flag stick, any part of the hole, if any part of the ball is in the hole below the surface of the putting green, it's considered in the hole. But if no part of the ball is in the hole below the surface of the putting green, it's not holed, and you have to obviously make your next stroke. Now it's probably going to stink because it's a one inch putt, but it's something that you have to do because it's not considered hold. And even if you, remove the flag stick, whether the ball falls in the hole or moves away from the hole, there's no penalty. You just have to replace it back on the lip of the hole there. So even if it falls in when you remove the flag stick, still has to be placed on the lip of the hole. It doesn't count as hold yet there. So maybe one reason why you would want to keep it out of the hole in that instance. And then when it comes to a ball overhanging the hole, some people like to sit there and wait to see if it'll fall in or try to cause an earthquake. But if any part of your ball overhangs the lip of the hole, you're given reasonable amount of time to reach the hole, and then 10 more seconds once you get to the hole. So as long as you, being reasonable about walking up to the hole, you're given 10 more seconds to see if it will fall in the hole. If after waiting that time, your ball goes in the hole, it would be, if the 10 seconds is not up yet and it goes in, it's considered hold. If your 10 seconds is up, your ball is treated to be at rest, and then you would have to, if it does fall into the hole after that, you would get, if your ball then falls into the hole before it's played, after being considered at rest, you have hold out with the previous stroke, but you get a 1-stroke penalty. So essentially it would be considered just as if you had tapped that one in. So just an important note there. You can't wait a whole minute or anything like that to see if your ball is going to fall in the hole. You have to proceed accordingly and do your due diligence in terms of making the next stroke or whatnot. All right. So a little bit now on marking and lifting the golf ball. Obviously, as you guys know, if you're planning on lifting the ball, you must. If you're planning on lifting and replacing it, you must put a mark down, and the mark can be placed right behind or right next to your ball, or the rules also permit you to hold a club on the ground right behind or right next to your ball. I guess it would depend really on what part of the course you're on. Typically, a ball marker is used, on the putting green, or maybe it's used in the bunker, or even on the fairway to mark your ball. If you're in a more of a challenging spot, maybe you're using your club or a tee or something like that. Just make sure you're marking the ball anytime you lift it and plan to replace it. If it happens where you do lift your ball without marking its spot, if you mark the spot in a wrong way, or if you make a stroke with a ball marker left in place, you would receive a 1-stroke penalty there. So some things to be aware of there. And then who may lift your ball is another part of this rule. Obviously, you, the player, authorized to lift your own ball, and then you can authorize anybody else to lift your ball, but it has to be a case-by-case basis. So, if I tell Mary B to lift my ball at one point, I can't just, she can't just assume, or I can't just assume that I'm allowing her to do it every time after that. I have to specifically authorize her each time. And then also on the putting green, your caddy does not need authorization to lift your ball. He's permitted to lift the ball and clean it there as well. And then when your ball is lifted, places that you can clean it. So you're always allowed to clean your ball when it's lifted on the putting green. And then you're always allowed anywhere else except in a few instances, and that would be to see if it's cut or cracked. So if you're just kind of checking your condition of the ball, if you've lifted it to check the condition of it, you're not permitted to clean it in that case. You're also not permitted to clean it to identify it. You can clean it a little bit if you absolutely need to identify it as your ball, but typically, if you're just lifting it to see a logo or something like that, you're not permitted to clean it. And if you can't identify it and it's dirty and you feel like you need to clean it, that would be when you need to notify a rules official or something like that, just to make sure it's okay that you do clean it. Another instance when you're not permitted to clean it is if you're lifting it if it interferes with play. So one of the most common ones I personally have come across is 2 balls that are next to each other in a bunker, or if someone's ball is in my stance or my intended line of swing or something like that. That would be where you would lift it, marking it and lifting it from the bunker. You're not permitted to clean it in that case. And then our final one, that's our last one there, sorry. So after you've lifted the ball, obviously you're lifting it with the intention of replacing it back on its spot. So when you're replacing, the original ball must be used, and another ball can be used in these instances, and that would be if you cannot recover your original ball with reasonable effort. So maybe it rolled into a penalty area or something like that. If your original ball is cut or cracked, obviously you can replace it with a new ball in that case. If you marked and lifted your ball when play was suspended and now you're resuming play, you're permitted to use a different ball in that case. And then if another player plays your original ball, which would be considered a wrong ball, you're permitted to also use a ball in that case when replacing your when replacing a ball back in the original spot that they hit your ball from. So a few instances where you're allowed to change your ball when it's been lifted in that case. Those ones are pretty self-explanatory. If your ball is destroyed, if you obviously can't find it, and other instances there. So if you clean your ball when you're not allowed, you would be assessed a 1-stroke penalty. So just some things to be careful about there. And obviously, when you're replacing a ball, you or the person you authorized to lift it must replace the ball on the original spot. You do receive a 1-stroke penalty if you replace it in the wrong way. So that would be, for instance, if you drop a ball instead of placing it on a spot. In the instance where you're replacing your ball and the original lie is altered, a good example here would be if a ball is in the sand and you have to dig for it to find it. Obviously, your digging would alter the original lie. So in that case, the rules require you to recreate that lie when you're replacing it. And so that would consist of burying that ball back in the sand, as you can see in this picture, but you are permitted to leave a small part visible if the ball was covered. And that would just be so you can identify it. Obviously, you don't want to just be hacking at the sand and not be able to find your ball again there. So recreate the lie as best as you can, as best as it is back to the original lie there. So. And then if you're trying to replace your ball and it does not stay on its original spot, you're permitted 2 tries to try to replace it on that original spot. And then after those 2 tries, you need to find the nearest spot where it will stay at rest. And obviously, you know, that spot can't be any nearer to the hole. It has to be as close to that spot as you can, as the original spot, as you can get it to stay. And that could take you many tries. You just got to make sure you're not going closer to the hole. And so if your original spot was in the general area, obviously the nearest spot needs to be in the general area. If the original spot was in the bunker or penalty area, you have to stay in those areas as well. And then also, if it was on the putting green, you have to stay on the putting green or in the general area. So in that case, it might change a little bit. You know, if you can't get your ball to stay on a hill on a putting green, and the nearest spot where it will stop is on the fringe, totally allowed there, as long as it's not nearer to the hole, like we said before.
Ryan, what happens when I'm trying to get the ball to come to rest? Can I push it down a little bit to make it stay there?
Typically, you're not allowed to. So you need to find a spot where you could just kind of let it go right above the surface of the ground, and it won't move there. So
right. So you can't push it down. I see a lot of kids trying to push it down to make it stay there, but you can't do that. You'd be penalized for that.
Yeah, and you're given unlimited chances to kind of get it to stay. So there's no pressure to get it to stay exactly on that original spot. Just as long as you're showing effort to get it to stay as nearest as you can without, like Mary B said, without pushing it into the ground. All right, so sometimes when you lift the ball, you're also going to drop, and we're always going to drop in a relief area. And obviously the relief area changed in 2019. We now have those half circles that we use, whether it's 1 or 2 club lengths, depending on the rule you're proceeding under. But anytime you're dropping in a relief area, the original ball or another ball may be used. And there is a right way and a wrong way to drop. The right way to drop would be, obviously, you need to drop your ball, and that consists of letting the ball go from a location at knee height, and you're not permitted to obviously throw it. You're not permitted to spin or roll the ball, or using any other motion that might affect where it comes to rest. So, with your hand, you just need to drop it straight down from knee height without trying to really affect where the ball goes in that case. Also, the ball, when dropped, must not touch any part of your body or equipment before it hits the ground. Important note there. And then knee height, a little diagram here for you guys at knee height. I think there's a lot of different ways you can kind of experiment with the dropping procedure. Some people, as you see here on the left, she just likes to kind of bend over from the waist. Some people may go down on one knee, but it's important to know that knee height obviously is the height of your knee when you're at standing position. Okay, so obviously anything above the knee would not be knee height, but even if you're bending your knees or not standing straight from your foot flat on the ground, your lower part of your leg is straight and dropping from that knee height. Just make sure it's as high as your knee at standing position. That's a great little diagram there. But there are a bunch of different ways now to kind of experiment with that knee height drop. So I encourage you guys to kind of find what works best for you. Overall, I think you just want something that's going to be consistent.
Yeah, Ryan, I think this rules change was a great one because I think you're going to be a better dropper, and especially if you practice a little bit. I like to have the ball out in front of me and to where I can see it. I know originally there were a lot of professionals that were doing it bending sideways, which it made it very awkward. But now I think everyone's caught on that if I kind of hold it out in front of me, knee height, I can see exactly where I'm going to drop it. And because it's not dropping from shoulder height, it's not going to roll as much. So I think this is a great rule because it will speed up play. And I think overall give you as a player a better lie if you pay attention.
Yeah, it definitely leads to more consistent, drops and just overall less issues when you drop from a higher height. So I definitely agree. And then obviously when you're dropping a ball, it must be dropped in a relief area. So it has to land in that relief area. So when a player drops in the right way and the ball comes to rest in the relief area, so if it strikes in the relief area and it comes to rest there, your relief is complete. You've done your job, you've completed your dropping procedures, and you can move on to the next stroke. But there are obviously a few instances where the ball may come to rest outside the relief area. So a few instances here on the right-hand side. Obviously the first one there, you can see the ball lands in the relief area and it comes to rest inside the relief area. That's a good drop. Like we said, you move on there. The second one here in the middle, she drops the ball in her relief area. So first step is good, lands in the relief area, but then it comes to rest outside the relief area. That would be an instance where you would drop a second time. And then also the third picture is demonstrating where she drops the ball from knee height. It lands, it strikes outside the relief area and then comes to rest inside the relief area. So dropped in the right way, but it came to rest or it struck the wrong part of the course first. So in those last two instances, anytime it's not, it comes to rest outside the relief area, you have to drop a ball in the right way a second time. So it's drop, and then if that second drop also comes to rest outside the relief area, that's when you proceed to place the ball on the spot where it last touched the ground on that last drop you had. So,
Ryan, I just wanted to make a point on this rule that I see happen a lot with players, and not just junior players, but when they take relief and it ends up rolling into a divot, they quickly pick it up. And unfortunately, if that divot's within your relief area, your ball's in play. So just pay attention. You don't get to drop again because you got a bad lie. So relief doesn't always mean good. Just remember that.
Mhm. Yep. And always good also, you know, for these instances, you can see she clearly measured out her relief area. Always a good idea to measure that relief area so you can clearly know whether or not it comes to rest in that area. You would hate to have to drop it and then kind of backtrack from there. Always measure your relief area with tees or whatever you like to use to ensure that you're proceeding and dropping correctly. If when the ball is dropped, it's deliberately deflected or stopped. So if you, you know, if you deliberately try to bounce it off your foot or stop it with your foot or some type of equipment, that does not count as one of your 2 drops, and you have to drop again. And the general penalty would be applied. That's be 2 strokes in that instance. So anytime you drop incorrectly, it does not count towards your 2 drops in the drop place procedure, just so you guys know. So and then in the instance where you do make a mistake in these procedures, you know, you're permitted to lift your ball without penalty and correct your mistake before playing your ball. In 2 instances here, the first one would be when you have substituted another ball for the original ball when it wasn't allowed. That's an instance where you can pick that ball that you substituted back up and put the original ball back into play. Or when you've replaced, dropped, or placed your ball, one in a wrong place, or it came to rest in a wrong place, you're allowed to correct that mistake. If you've done one of those 3 things in a wrong way, so if you obviously if you dropped your ball in a wrong way, you're allowed to pick it back up, even if you dropped it in a wrong way, it strikes your relief area and comes to rest in that relief area. You need to pick that back up and drop it the correct way. And then if you by chance used a procedure under a rule that did not apply to whatever you had going on during that stroke, that's where you're permitted to again pick up the ball and correct your mistake. And then another common thing that happens all the time really is making a stroke from where the previous stroke was made. So maybe you're proceeding under a rule or you're taking a stroke and distance penalty. Very important to know how to put the ball back into play. That all depends on where the previous stroke was made. So if the previous stroke was made in the teeing area, you must play that ball from anywhere inside the teeing area, and you are permitted to tee it up in that instance. So obviously a good instance there would be if you hit a ball out of bounds off your drive. That would be an instance where you take your stroke and distance, play the next stroke from where the previous stroke was made, and then in the instance where you're making a stroke from the previous spot in the general area, a penalty area, or a bunker, a ball is dropped within 1 club length of the reference point, and the reference point was where you know obviously your previous stroke was made, but in the same area of the course as the reference point, and no nearer to the hole. So you can't go closer to the hole, and it has to be in the same area of the course. So if you hit your previous stroke from a bunker, you have to again play from that bunker. If it was in a penalty area, you have to play from the penalty area, and then same with the general area. If the previous stroke was made on the putting green, a ball is placed on the spot where the previous stroke was made. So important note there, you're placing the ball. So a few different spots, areas where you're not doing the same thing in each instance there. Just need to be aware of what the correct procedure is on that particular part of the course. So,
You know, Ryan, on the playing from the previous spot, I think one of the most famous times was during the Masters, and Tiger Woods on 13 putted his ball from the left side of the green, and it got a little speed and it rolled down into now what's called the penalty area. And what did he do? He just placed another ball right back on the putting green, took the stroke for hitting it in the penalty area and putted again. But it sounds funny to play another stroke from the putting green, but those things can happen. So I know at the British Open, players have also gone ahead and taken a penalty when they putted off a putting green. It's gone into one of those deep pot bunkers that they have over in the UK that are really difficult to get out of. You might have to go out backwards. So sometimes it's pretty smart if something funny like that happens, just to take it right back on the putting green and putt from there. So
yeah, that sounds like a good instance of where the rules are kind of helping you there. So
they are helping, right?
So would that be considered just taking like an unplayable from that bunker, and you're taking your stroke and distance?
You're taking stroke and distance, right? Because you're always allowed to go back to where your previous stroke. So you hit the previous stroke would be on the putting green. And it was funny when Tiger did this, it was a while ago, but when he putted it into the penalty area, he didn't think twice. Instead of dropping a ball on the other side of the ditch and hit another shot from there, he just put his ball right back down on the putting green and took one stroke for the penalty area. So, and I say, and you'll see it happen sometimes in the British Open when those pot bunkers are so severe. And you also saw Phil Mickelson when he went a little crazy at the U.S. Open at Shinnecock a few years ago on the putting green when he went swatting it. You know, all he had to do when he putted it and that ball was going off the putting green, he just had to replace the ball with the one-stroke penalty and re-putt it. So there are times this is going to help you. Seems like an odd rule.
Yeah. And then something that may happen while you guys are going through these procedures, whether it's like dropping your ball or replacing your ball, sometimes it ends up in a wrong place. And players, obviously, they're not permitted to make a stroke from a ball that's in a wrong place, must not play a ball from a wrong place. And there's two determining factors in terms of how to proceed once you do play a ball from a wrong place. And that would be whether it's a serious breach of the rule or not a serious breach. There aren't, I wouldn't say there are things that depict these serious or not serious in stone. It's kind of a judgment call by the committee that's involved in the ruling. It all depends on, obviously, you know, if you gained an advantage or not by hitting a wrong ball or hitting from a wrong place. Sorry. If it's not a serious breach, so maybe if you're on the putting green and you mark and lift your ball and then you go back to mark it and you put it, you know, maybe a few inches to the right of where you were, where it was originally marked, that may be you know, not a serious breach. In that case, you would receive the general penalty of 2 strokes and continue the play of the hole. If an instance where it was a serious breach, so say you incorrectly took relief from a penalty area, and you know, say it was a yellow, a marked yellow where you're only permitted, it's a par 3, and you hit it over the water, it bounces on the hill and back in. You're only permitted to take relief on the fairway side of the water. So if you took relief on the other side, that would probably be considered a serious breach in that case. And you are also assessed the general penalty. In that case, you also must go back and correct your mistake. And that would be by playing from the correct spot where you were supposed to play from, whether it was under a rule or not. And you have to correct your mistake before you tee off on the next hole, or before you turn in your scorecard if it's your last hole of the day. So that does happen, but you're always permitted to go back and correct the mistake if you feel like it's a big error that you made. In either instance, whether you think it's a serious breach or not, good idea to notify a rules official in that case, because it would help to get their determination on the situation as well. So, but that actually ends our session today. Some really important rules today, some ones that are good to always revisit because they do come up, at least I would say, especially, you know, dropping in relief area. That's something that happens probably at least once every round. So Rule 14 is a really big important rule for for us as competitive golfers for sure. So just want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, taking your time. Hopefully you guys are all staying sane at home, finding activities to keep yourselves busy. I just encourage you all to try to keep a routine and continue to be excited about the golf that we have to play in the future. So with that, we do have one more webinar next week, so look out for any type of RSVP emails and updates that we send out about that. And if you guys have any questions, either on today's rules or anything else that we've talked about in terms of rules, feel free to reach out to me. And these are also posted online if you'd like to view them again. Just log into your account on our website and you can view those there as well. So thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Good night. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Mary B.